Welcome everyone to our favorite meeting of the week. Every Friday at 11. It becomes like a club now here. So thank you for joining. I'm especially excited to have a truth teller talk to us about what he thinks about us. So without further ado, uh, Horace, can you tell us why our KM sucks and what we can do about it?
Wow, what a way to start, Oz. And I'm actually going to start by sharing my screen, and I'll very quickly correct that opinion by saying KM doesn't actually suck. That was just a bait and switch to get you guys to come. But no, the underlying theme of today's conversation is going to be about how do we make KM better, not just why KM sucks. And we're going to do a poll in the very beginning to figure out, does KM actually suck? And that's how we're going to kick off our Choose Your Own Adventure seminar. So before we begin, for those who I haven't met or who haven't met me, hi, it's wonderful to meet you. I am the CEO of Syntheia. Syntheia is a company that helps lawyers and KM teams, I guess, analyze and gain insights out of your firm's documents. We typically work really closely with KM and innovation teams, which is how we got to know what KM does quite well. And we work with them to build tools that serve lawyers. And what we try to think of ourselves as doing as a mission is we're giving lawyers a bundle of tools that help them gain insights faster, not just like word add-ins that can search through a clause bag, which yes, we do, but do more things than that. Things like being able to do multi-document blacklining and like specialized applications that help them build funds side letters for private funds teams. We kind of think of ourselves as like builders of calculators, and that's going to become relevant in a little bit in this conversation because we see ourselves as building deterministic tools. And I can see questions coming up in the chat, so please feel free to ask as many questions as you like. I will try and get to them. And this is going to be very interactive once we get past the next page, which is about acknowledgements. So let me tell you why I chose today's topic. So recently, and you guys might have also seen these sorts of claims out there, there are a lot of companies that are saying, hey, we can help you get a first draft of agreement XYZ if you just dump in 5, 10, 30 documents into a vault, and then we're going to just concoct it, and it's going to be the perfect first draft. Um, Between us friends, that's not going to give anyone like a quality document. And then I saw Microsoft had this demo where Microsoft concocted the first draft, and for those of you who freeze frame and watch the show, you're like, that's never gonna fly. And then Box.com had one of these, and then more and more people, every man and his dog, had these tools that essentially try and like bypass KM and bypass lawyers. And it got me thinking, like, what do people actually think lawyers and KM teams do? And so this is that seminar to explore how do we better meet the expectation of lawyers and clients, and how can we frame KM to play an increasingly more important role in legal services in the age of AI. So that's today's premise. And before we start, acknowledgements. Before this presentation, in order to prepare, I interviewed some lovely leaders in KM whose names feature on this page here. I won't go through all of them. I'll probably name drop some of you a little bit later, but to say thank you for all your time and your thoughts and your insights. It helped a lot in preparing this. So let's get started. Choose your own adventure. You stare at the 23rd, pardon the interruption, email to hit your inbox that week. And each one is a reminder that another lawyer was unable to find the information they need. The case law, the precedents, the last deal, they all just seems a little out of touch when they're needed the most. And so the question gnaws at you. Is there a better way to manage and deliver this knowledge? And as you take a deep breath, you pull your hand away from the keyboard and you realize you have a choice to make, and the choice could reshape how your firm handles its collective institutional knowledge. By the way, guys, this is me playing Dungeon Master in Dungeons and Dragons. So anyone who wants to play, email me. I've actually never played. So here are your three choices. Do you want to rethink the KM system? Do you want to go for quick wins? Or do you want to have cultural change and training? But actually, because I said we're going to start by doing a survey, we're going to start with this. Everyone, please sign into menti.com, use that QR code or use that code and answer the question. The question is, does your KM actually suck? And all your answers will be shown on screen in a second. So for those who don't have it, I'm going to change my screen in a second so you can actually see that output. So far, our KM is okay. More and more votes are coming in. I love it. So I actually asked this question to a lot of people beforehand, and the results were kind of mixed. And I think like even the KM team themselves rarely call themselves amazing. And I think it's because we're so humble. So if you are amazing, don't be humble. Tell everybody that you're amazing. I will call on you though, and I will ask you, why are you amazing? So as we're kind of like looking at this, it's a pretty even split between we're pretty good, we're okay, and some people are just getting started. And this is interesting. I did not expect such an even split between all of these. So let's have a look at the next question then. So for those of you who've said, hey, our KM is pretty good, or that our KM is okay, I want to ask you, um, what is it that makes your KM team amazing? So we're going to go to the next slide here, which is what's your KM team actually doing really well? So type in your responses, tell us in long form what it is that you're doing well, and I actually have some pre-baked answers that some of our interviewees prepared for us earlier. So to give you some examples while you're answering this question of what's your KM team doing really well, here is what the interviewees have said, and I'll come back to this presentation in a second. So keep going. So here's some examples. Making precedent documents available outside the DMS in SharePoint. I think actually I won't name anyone who gave these responses just out of anonymity, but these are some responses. Innovation, socializing information, and getting people excited to try new technologies, building a team of incredible PSLs, that's practice support lawyers, I think, for those who are in the UK, who are appreciated by the firm. KM lawyers embedded in practice groups have built trust and established themselves as experts. Non-lawyers and lawyers working together to effectuate change, so teamwork, building a closing binder data set that can be used for multiple purposes, super specific but super useful, and better understanding of tech and data architecture necessary to run KM. So these are some examples of what firms have done really well as assessed by the KM teams. And here's what everyone has been answering. Respecting each other's needs and perspectives, collecting interesting and important deal points, precedent and clause bags, hiring talented KM counsels. There's sort of a theme going on here of like it's about people, process, and technology. Surprise. So I'll push these out at the end of this conversation so that everybody has a copy. But for now, this is what KM teams are doing well. Now, in the responses before, about half of you also said, we're just getting started or KM team is not doing so well. So then the question is, what's your KM team not doing well? It is anonymous. So feel free to say whatever you want. And while we are sharing this screen, what's your KM team not doing so well? Some examples.
Horace,
Yes.
would you mind just flicking back to the QR code, please?
Oh yes, of course. QR code. I will.
I didn't know whether I
right
could
now.
screenshot it or not. So
Yes, here's your QR
thank
code.
you so much.
You're welcome.
And this is a moment to remind everyone, this is a seminar, not a webinar. At any moment, you could turn on your camera and unmute yourself and participate. Horace can take it. Horace can take it. Damien training well.
You can object. You can strongly say, I don't believe a word of this, Horace. Where are you getting this from? And I'll very happily argue you to the hour's end. So that's QR code. So I'll share again the screen with the outputs. So we try to boil the ocean. Articulating the ROI is hard, working with IT to get the tech we need, being efficient with attorney time, getting feedback from attorneys. We need more headcount. This is fantastic. This all lines up with some of the themes we're going to get to a little bit later. So some of the answers we got from the people we interviewed are KM letters, KM newsletters aren't working well, or data and governance strategies are not clear with how KM should operate. Data cleanup continues to be a big problem. Training and upskilling people on new tools is a big problem. Cutting through the overwhelming amount of noise is a problem. And this list continues to grow. I love it. IT, IT. I love that this is anonymous. So whoever wrote IT, we don't know who you are, but you know who you are. No strategy. And I think ultimately it's a question of like, there's a raft of reasons why KM doesn't work well, but there seems to be a consistent theme for why KM does work well. At least that's a hypothesis for now. So we're going to go back to our story. And this is some of what people have said KM hasn't done so well. And we're going to do a very quick lightning round. And we're going to test you on how well you know your lawyers. And the question is, if you have your Menti open, what do your lawyers want from KM? And it's going to form into a word cloud. And by the way, this is one of 3 slides where I've got no pre-baked responses. So whatever you write on here, I have no idea what you're going to put up. But what are your lawyers asking for from you? So here is the word cloud. I hope you're having fun so far. I'm having fun. My dungeon master career is definitely going to take off after this. So I love that magic is in the middle of the page. Answers, precedents, immediacy, institutional knowledge, ground truth, quick answers. This is fantastic. Now, hold that thought, because the next question is, what does your firm want from KM? Not your lawyers. What does your firm want from KM? Now, obviously, I framed this so that I expect different answers to come up, but will different answers actually come up? Efficiency, money, they don't know. Magic features again. An easy button, protect the firm, value, everything. Oh, this is fantastic. So more. Now, one of the themes that I'm going to get to later on is expectation management. And already we can kind of see a disjoint between what the firm wants and what lawyers want from KM. And that kind of puts KM in a slightly awkward position. And how do we address this? What do we do? We're going to talk about it. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this time you're going to see a slide that talks about what's KM supposed to do anyway. These word clouds will be shared later. So rest assured, you're not going to lose them. So what's KM supposed to do anyway? So historically, and this is true because I asked GPT to write this for me. Historically, KM ensures that lawyers can access, share, use, and inform the firm's collective internal and external knowledge. It's all about how to connect lawyers with knowledge. And historically, US and UK have had different approaches. US is very centered on technology first, an informal approach and embedding inside the practice groups to then really serve the lawyers in those practice groups. The precedents are the past deals. Leverage the last deal you've done. Just change a few words, change the number, change the date, etc. UK has been taking it in a very different way. And by UK, I also include Australia and some of the Commonwealth countries in this, where they've had a more formal approach. It's more centralized. KM is in sort of the operating heart of the law firm. It's people first. They hire subject matter experts instead of technology, and precedents are always curated and they're approved as templates. But the trend over the last decade is there's now a convergence between US and UK. And more, the role of KM's also expanding. We saw earlier, KM's not just about connecting knowledge and lawyers together. It's about choosing the right technologies. It's about putting in place processes. It's about advising the firm on strategy and value, etc. This is growing and growing, and it's evolving faster than ever before because of KM and AI. So I see a lot of questions in the chat. So should we answer some of the questions first before we go to the next slide, or are we okay?
Or comments. We will ask the questions for you.
Amazing.
Colin's gonna go on unmute and you get plenty of moderators here.
Amazing. So now we're going to get into slightly more of the substance. This is the framework that we put together from interviewing a lot of the KM leaders. So the KM team does a lot of work that lawyers typically don't see. And it's not just delivering knowledge, it's strategizing, capturing, curating, delivering, and maintaining. Delivery is just one aspect. And all of those have specific tasks involved. Strategizing is understanding what the firm needs, therefore aligning yourself with the firm, identifying the gaps, having a vision, engaging the stakeholders. Capturing is identifying what's actually valuable, wade through this giant database of information, picking and choosing what you want to capture, conducting interviews with people, integrating technology so you can automatically capture things, and then curating, more so I think in UK than the US style, applying taxonomies, sanitizing, validating, standardizing, organizing, etc. Delivering is where lawyers really focus on. So how do you get the information to the lawyers? How do you integrate all the things together? How do you build training, support, embed knowledge in the processes that lawyers have? And finally, removing outdated materials, monitoring usage, capturing feedback, and staying ahead of changes that are coming. As Dave Majors and Lauren May put it, KM is here to help lawyers better serve clients and create happier lawyers. All of this goes to that goal. So while that's true, yes, hello.
I'm going to jump in because Oz is expecting me to jump in. So one question, I think this might be more for the group, but where are the knowledge teams stopping where are the bounds of the KM team as far as data strategy goes? Obviously, firm experience, knowledge of the transactions and the cases that you've overseen is core KM, but obviously, if it's livened up with other data within the firm, because I feel like some firms' knowledge is maybe driving some of the data strategy and others they're not. And I would love to know what the answer is. So someone tell me what the answer is. Where does the scope of KM begin and end?
I can give my view, but I think there's going to be a different answer from everyone on the call today because it is so diverse. I think it depends on who you have on staff, what their specialties are, etc. So if anyone wants to suggest an answer to that, very happy to dive into that now on what is KM's role in terms of data strategy. Where does it start and stop?
Janine, you're supposed to go on video and answer audibly, not gaslight me in the chat.
So I think that there is no start or stop within KM. I think it's really the center of the firm, understanding what data is needed for knowledge and for precedents and for business growth that BD can leverage, that can really change profitability. So I really think it is the core that doesn't start or stop.
I wonder, I think that's true. And also the question is, do institutional silos allow that to be true? That is BD going to say, no, that's my data? And is, finance going to say, no, that's my data? So the question is, yes, I think what Janine said is true intellectually, but politically, I wonder if it's true.
I think it differs between firms, right? A different culture and different firms have different way of running.
I'm going to share a slide.
And
I think
also in the personalities of the people in the C-suite.
Yes. I think it very much depends on your view. Now, swap out the word AI for data, and suddenly you have your answer. What's your perspective on how much KM overlaps with data? And if you're thinking this, then I think, yeah, KM is the heart of everything. If you're thinking that, then KM contributes to data and maybe the firm has a different data strategy. So how you frame your perspective really determines where you go with this. Now, this is relevant to Conan's question, and this is a little sort of like progression that I got from talking to Phil Bryce. And Phil's perspective is, after so many years of working as a knowledge leader, knowledge that's been delivered actually fits into many different tiers. It could be data, it could be information, it could be insights, it could be wisdom. They are very different things, or it's actually refinements of data, if you like. So I know, Damien, you're on the call. Your favorite analogy for this is data is oil. Well, if data is oil, then information is petroleum, and insight is, I have no idea, maybe some other variation of petroleum, right? Like
plastic. Plastics is made out of.
Yes. And so all of this kind of comes back to this idea of, well, data is the beginning of everything, and how you link up the data, classify the data, connect all the dots together is the difference between data, information, insights, and wisdom. Now, this chart has knowledge and conspiracy theory. Let's ignore those. So this, I think, is the crux of the issue that we have with lawyers. When lawyers come to the KM team and say, hey, give me X, they might mean give me the insight of X, not necessarily just give me the raw data. And here's an example that I found earlier. When someone says, what's market for break fees in M&A deals for 2025? Well, you go back and say, here's 10 examples of SPAs from 2025 for similar buyer and seller profiles. A lawyer's going to look at you and say, why are you giving me that? I actually just want to know what the percentage thing is. So you're supposed to go back with information, but that expectation mismatch is something that's really, really hard to manage. And as KM team, you essentially have to prepare all of this data in advance, maybe not with AI, to answer the different tiers of this question. And by the way, insights and wisdom, that's where you start getting into the, I'm a lawyer, don't tread on my toes. It's my job to think about the insights and the wisdom. An interesting thing here I want to point out is, when most people think about like market data, and I'm a transactional lawyer by background, so that's what I think about. They think, okay, it's the percentages, it's the sort of like landscape, it's the commercial data. But one thing that we sometimes forget is lawyers are not just commercial guys. Sometimes they actually say, what's market for drafting of something? Tax indemnities, for example. Then how are you going to be able to give them this information or this insight where you can tell them, well, actually, think about taxes imposed, because taxes imposed is not technically a liability until there's a final determination. So you want to expand what the drafting is. It's not just a number on a page. So delivering the right level of information is a challenge for KM teams. So now we go back to our story. You stare at the 23rd. Please pardon the interruption email to hit your inbox. You take a deep breath and you decide, okay, I have to do something to serve my clients better, to make them less frustrated. What do you work on? Those 5 different things: strategize, capture, curate, deliver, or maintain. We're actually going to pick one in the slide. So for those who don't have your slide open, now it's time to pick. The rest of this session, depending on how much time we have, we probably can cover just 1, maybe 2 of these topics. So what is the most challenging and deserves focus of this group that we're all going to talk about? I'll share the results in a second. Capturing, delivering, maintaining, strategizing. Oh, this is great. Capturing. So someone said to me, I can't remember who now. Someone said to me, oh, I do remember who. It was Stella Lava from Slaughter and May, who said, getting the right data captured is one of the hardest things KM has ever done. And I think this chart kind of is showing that. So we've got 2 leaders at the moment, strategizing and capturing. Can anyone bump one of those up? And that's what we're going to focus on. Who hasn't voted? Capturing. Okay, we're going to talk about capturing first. And then we're going to go talk about strategizing afterwards, even though I think strategizing might be the more important one. So let's talk about capturing. I'm going to share my slides again. Oh, now strategizing is coming up. Was too late, guys. I've moved on. So let's go to talk about improving the capture of knowledge. You think about all the valuable insights hidden in email threads, meeting notes, hallway conversations, etc. The problem is the lawyer isn't that your lawyers don't know things, is that the lawyer's knowledge rarely makes it into a system where people can find it. So you decide it's time to streamline capture using templates, prompts, and better tools. But the biggest challenge of all is, how do you motivate busy lawyers to contribute? How do you build a business case for this? So now let's all turn on your cameras, turn off mute, and join us to discuss how we tackle the challenge for capturing the data. I am going to share in a second I'll stop sharing this screen. I'm going to share in a second the mind map that we put together ahead of this conversation, but I do want to throw it open to say, okay, when we talk about capture, one of the key things that people are now thinking about is, how do we use AI to help capture? But AI is one aspect. We go back to this kind of success strategy of people, process, and technology. Technology is one. What about people? What about process? Does anyone have any stories to share before I start sharing my screen to talk about what we've learned from talking to the various interviewees? It always is always like this. Don't be shy. I'm extremely friendly to a fault.
I'll jump in, and it'll be like the podcast horse. So one aspect of this is that we've always had the problem of, did you put it in the document management system or did you store it on your hard drive? So that is, that idea of, did you put it in the right place so that we can collect it? So that's thing number one. Thing number two is, as we go forward, more and more calls like the ones that we're on are being recorded, then transcribed. That is another source of data that should be captured. And so the real question is, can we get around attorney-client privilege? Do we trust the tool that is capturing this to be able to say it's still privileged even though it's being transcribed? And the second, will we get the humans to be able to record it, to be able to capture that knowledge?
Damien, I think they're two completely separate points, which we'll cover in a second. So one is, how do we get stuff from people's private folders and USBs into a public share drive so the firms captured it? And the second is there other sorts of things we can do to capture the tacit knowledge in people's heads, the meetings, the voice notes, etc. So why don't we focus on those two things? And by the way, I think technology can help with both of those. So let's go with the tacit knowledge first, because that's the one that's on the cutting edge. So I don't know how many of you saw, but OpenAI released yesterday, there's now technology in GPT where it will actually capture your meeting notes, and it will summarize it for you, and it will send it back to you. It's a really interesting idea to think about. Is that a missing piece of information that we are not capturing right now? So all the meetings where the partner is talking to the associates, where all that sort of like experience has been distilled into a conversation, what are we doing with that at the moment? How do we capture it? How do we, like, first of all, get IT's approval and InfoSec's approval to capture this? And second, if you can get that approval, why are we not doing it? So I'll leave that thought with you, because I think that's on the cutting edge, and that's not something we can address very quickly because it involves so many people. And Kate, great comment, should we capture this at all? But on concrete stuff, I'm a big fan of using technologies you already have and capturing through the technology, using the technology invisibly. So here, I'm going to share my screen of the mind map. So on the capture path, Sarah Miro, you know nothing, Jon Snow. AI does not actually know or understand quality. There's no way to use an AI to reliably determine whether a precedent or drafting language or guidance written by someone's high quality or not. So what do we do with that? And even worse, AI is highly compelling. So even if something's of low quality and irrelevant, it's going to argue that it's really, really good. So this raises a question: should we use AI to capture information at all? Anyone who wants to chime in with that?
I think
you can. Oh, go ahead,
go,
Kate.
Catherine. No, go on.
I was just going to say, unless you can curate it, unless you can put some kind of quality or context assessment around it, I don't know. I have a lot of difficulty with this because I think it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. Catherine, your views completely align with Marlene Gabauer's view, which is, I think, firm needs to keep data more organized rather than throwing everything in. Garbage in, garbage out. It's that age-old problem. So there's a few different paths this starts going into, which is, well, is there a market to capturing good data? What about connecting all the different systems together, or buying the data, or asking your vendor for transparency? Those are some ideas that we started exploring.
And also metrics. Yes. If you remember, like a bottom-up approach of figuring out what is high quality is how much a specific document actually gets used and reused. One of the frustrations that a lot of us have had with iManage, for example, is that their metrics have been so bad that you can't actually identify how many times the document is resaved over and over again. And from there, you can actually identify, apparently this document gets reused again and again in all of our private M&A. That might actually indicate that that could be high quality, which at least enables you to set up flags within the system. And that's really old technology, not even AI. That's just identifying what people are actually searching for, opening, and then resaving into new client matter workspaces.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Like, all the technology that exists today, everything that you are using today, you should rightly ask your vendor, can you give me that data? Because you have it. And if you don't have it, why don't you have it? And I think more and more we're seeing design partnerships and dev partnerships being formed between law firms and technology companies. So why don't we push for this? And I think it's one of those situations where if every law firm asks for it, then vendors will cave and start providing this data, because it exists. It's not hard to log usage. That's kind of point number one. And then point number two is, if you connect all the disconnected systems together, and including external data, you have a data lake. Now, famously, right now, Integrata, Tom Baldwin has a company that provides you a data lake. I know Fireman has as well. So should these be used? Can you use these to capture the data? I don't think either of these helps you decide what is the right data to capture, but it will help you decide, like, well, from where, from what collection can I choose from?
Horace?
Yes, Tom, hello.
Yeah, hey, thank you. This is a great presentation. Thank you for putting it on my radar. The question of quality is one that really stood out to me, because I think there's a quality of the data itself, and then there's the quality of the type of data, and the quality of the data as it connects to what you're expecting from the lawyers and motivating them, kind of going back to the point that you made. I think one of the mistakes that I'm seeing happen, and I don't purport to have the solution, as with everybody, this is a work in progress, is there's not enough thinking on, oh, what can we extract from the docs? What can we extract from AI? What is tacit knowledge that we have to get from the attorneys? And within each of the pools of data, what is quality, as in what should I be spending my energy doing, and what am I expecting, and how does that relate to the time that I'm expecting from the associates or whoever I'm getting the data from, the resources that I have, right? A lot of times it seems to start from the partners who are saying, from leadership saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we captured this and this and this and this and this and this? And then you end up having systems that are incredibly difficult to build, or you're expecting too much from busy associates, versus saying, this is tacit knowledge, I have to get it from the attorneys and I have to have it. And just focusing on that, and then seeing what you can use AI for to get from the docs, and kind of curating what you're asking for as a starting point in order to enable you to collect and curate the data.
Yeah. There's a point I like to make here, which is everybody kind of talks about capturing data as focused on capturing data that comes out of existing systems, what we might call data exhaust. And my view on this is that's really useful. However, that's not even half the picture, because you're not designing these systems to capture the right data in the first place. They're just a byproduct. So you're better off designing something going forward that's going to capture the right data going forward. And I kind of give three reasons for this. The first reason is going back and pulling old information to get data exhaust, you're generally using AI or something to help you. And every time you do that, you introduce some sort of probabilistic risk. So it may not be accurate, and therefore you've got something that could introduce as a variable. Factor number two is it's not designed to capture what you need anyway. You're shoehorning in the exhaust. And factor number three is anything that's older than 12 months for transactional at least typically gets much less useful. So you're better off designing a system that's going to be able to capture good information going forward, even if you don't have anything for the first 6 months. Once you pass the first 6 months, you're going to have better data and you would have done it more cheaply, in my view. So that's a sort of like temporal element to think about. We have this idea called the flywheel. So this is sort of a mix between creating an incentive and also building systems to capture the right data. And the way we think about it is, don't start from what you already have. Instead, start from where does my firm have a competitive advantage, and therefore, what can you convince your partners will be a money maker? Because if you can convince your partners that there's going to be an ROI by capturing and collecting the knowledge, they become your champions. And they're going to go out and say, hey, go do your work. And when you do your work, contribute in whatever way, whether it's an explicit system you have to email in, or an invisible system that captures automatically. When you perform the work as usual, it's captured, which gives you more data. Hopefully that data lines up with your initial goal in the first place of where you have a competitive advantage, which incentivizes more partners and so on and so on. And so you kind of link up ROI with your processes to create that flywheel. Much easier said than done, by the way. Like, this is a theoretical kind of piece of work. Now, we've thought about this as Syntheia for our much more smaller universe of kind of deal work. And this is kind of how we think about the flywheel. And it's for the purpose of capturing more gold standard precedent documents. So our flywheel is, we have an email agent. People email this in and gets a summary of key issues and insights. It saves some time because triages, do I have to work on this or can I leave this till tomorrow? That email and the document is captured inside the system, which can then be used in our comparison tool to figure out, well, where are the issues? Well, how is it different? Those insights incentivizes lawyers to go, oh, I'm so happy contributing stuff I would have kept in my USB in the first place. And that then goes to the knowledge lawyers inside a precedent portal that they can organize, which then goes to feed a Word add-in to find the drafting examples. And as they draft, that becomes a good example, which feeds into the system again, and so on and so on. So you organically build this flywheel. But it's specifically aimed at orchestrating precedent documents. And we go back to your KM strategy should be driven by what is the incentive for you? What is the ROI, competitive advantage that your firm has that you should be leveraging that will convince your management and C-suite to invest money with you? So this idea of there is a gap in the market, and there's a few case studies, Zoom case study, data exhaust. For those of you who haven't read this, Legatix came out a few weeks ago and talked about how their platform for deal management work captures a lot of data exhaust. Worth having a read. A really interesting, also very specific way of capturing data exhaust. And Janine, you actually said something really interesting, is why should I care? Is the contextual information outside of the documents. And so extraction from the documents themselves doesn't tell you the why. You need something more than that. All the clever extraction in the world applied to your DMS is not going to tell you what lawyers want to go back to the data, information, insights, wisdom hierarchy. So something like, hey, email this in with the email context as well as a document might help you capture that.
So just a public service announcement and connecting to our last week's seminar. Remember that there is a workflow agents ideas competition, and that's your chance to win a $5,000 spa visit, the deep judge. So I put the link in the comments. Any idea that you have here, go submit it there and vote on other people's ideas so we could build the best ideas that come out of it so we have better products for the industry. Thank you.
A great announcement, Oz, by the way. So what this doesn't talk about is, can AI automatically use agents to kind of loop back and capture more data? And the answer is absolutely yes. Now, I'm gonna kind of do one thing here, which is to say, be careful with this. I think AI is really, really useful, but it's useful for around 90% of situations. I want to show you guys this chart. This is one of my favorite charts, which is the difference between improving AI and improving KM are on two different dimensions. As AI gets smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, soon GPT-5, it's going to be able to answer those how, what, why questions and explain a lot of things. But at no point does this model know anything about you or your firm. And this is where I think KM at larger firms come into the limelight. How are you going to help the model utilize the knowledge of your firms to take it above what's publicly available? And the workflows to capture all of this is one example of how you might be able to do that. This other diagram I like to show is, like, there's no right and wrong, but there is a right and wrong. You would use AI to paint a picture of a house, but you don't want to use an AI to draw a blueprint and then build that house to live in. So there are cases for when AI is really good. There are cases for when AI is not really good. So agents, large language models, great for summarizing, transforming, exploring arguments. Come up with a plan to do X, exactly like what Deep Judge is saying. Come up with a plan to do something. Qualitative questions like who's an expert, how, what, why, and to get to the this is good enough. Whereas on the other hand, heuristics and workflows and machine learning, to go back to kind of like my thinking on the universe, is when you build the calculators, you want it to be hallucination free. You use that for things like text comparisons, decision trees that follow pre-made rules, like follow these steps to do A, B, and C. Quantitative questions like how many times have we done X and what is the answer exactly? All of those feature into like picking the right technology, to go back to people, process, technology, picking the right technology for the various tasks. So that actually, if we have enough time, maybe we can go to talk about the strategy slide just to begin with, just to whet the appetite. But actually, no, I'm going to stop. Before we close out the capture your knowledge path, I do want people to have a few takeaways. So does anyone have any thoughts on how you might be able to better capture your knowledge from that sort of mishmash of different points that we raised just now?
I'll just add one tidbit that I always think is very important on the data literacy side. One of the advantages of working with lawyers or your professional staff to collect data is for them to understand the value of it and how it works downstream. Comes full circle. They're going to use it at some point. So if they understand why it's important to contribute this information, how it's going to help them or others across the firm, what is that impact, that goes a really long way.
I think your point goes to learning and development, and that's also something KM teams are now bleeding into. So previously, KM teams may not have contributed to learning and training, but now more and more they're doing this as well. Like, I'm slightly cynical about teaching lawyers. Hey, if you give it to us, you're going to benefit in the long term. I think a lot of times they forget or they don't care. I think it's more important. Not more important. That is absolutely necessary, but also we have to build in incentives where in my thinking, they get benefits immediately from sharing that data. Like the prime example we use at Syntheia is one of the hardest things. I used to be a lawyer. There used to be a senior associate who sits down the hall from me. I won't name his name, but James, if you're listening, this is you, who had this USB of his favorite deal documents, and he never saved this anywhere. And when you're like, James, can you show me what deal had that? He's like, yeah, maybe. And he may or may not share with you. Now, James, however, was very happy to put his documents in to a comparison tool to go, hey, I can now assess what's market. And by doing that, he immediately gets insights he couldn't have gotten, and you've enticed him to share in an unknowing sort of way to a greater whole. So I think like tools have to be made to have that incentive built in, and the longer term benefit should not be the front and center. That should be the ancillary. So like the capture piece, I think, is really, really difficult, but smart design, smart tools can help you capture more and more relevant context. Now we've got 13 minutes left.
There's a human psychology piece to this also.
Yes.
If James had been told that, well, if you borrowed a document and you were told you had it because James made it available and James was given credit, over time, people blossom under the recognition. And that's a very positive way of doing it too.
I love that, Mary. I'm so cynical. So with the time left, I am going to very quickly flash up the slide about strategy, because I know 40% of people voted for this one. And I do want to go down that path just a little bit. And that is, how do you improve strategy? So you realize without a clear strategy, KM's effort risks being just another patchwork solution. So you gather a team of trusted partners and you begin asking the tough questions. What's our priority? How do they align with the firm's overall strategy? Do we build or buy? And what's the roadmap that balances immediate needs with long-term vision? So that's the setup. Now, again, I invite anyone and everyone to please turn off your mic and turn on your camera and let's discuss. But for those who may not want to discuss, we actually thought about this earlier, which is, how do you strategize? And very much focus on AI, because like everyone's thinking about AI right now. And part of the problem with strategizing is this underlying problem that people have, which is, well, the tools are not meeting lawyers where they are. Attorneys want to start with precedents, not just like, going back to that information hierarchy. They want precedents. So how do we deliver that to them? What do we need as a team, etc. So Phil Bryce said, again, going back to the hierarchy, and this is a really interesting point. I think generative AI opens up this avenue where if you have the raw data collected, Gen AI is incredible at transforming that raw data into insights. All you need is ask them the right question. Then you got to think about, how do I ask them the right question? How do I know the question to ask? And that's your subject matter experts. So Gen AI opens up possibilities, but it's not going to solve it on its own. So when you play the strategy game out, Dave Majors said this interesting thing. Should AI play a role in strategy? And Dave Major goes, KM is doing a lot more than it used to. It's now even helping with managing deals, optimizing people tracking, etc. So the role of KM is expanding and expanding. And so it's not simply delivery of information anymore. It's also process, it's also capture, it's also all these other things. So then we got to think about, where does AI fit into this overall picture? And there's 3 views of the universe right now. You'll probably guess where my view is, but the 3 views of the universe are: AI can replace KM. Just dump all your documents in and it will solve it itself. The other view is AI can support KM, which is, we have tools for KM teams. And Lauren May said, interestingly, most AI tools are built for practicing lawyers, and there are very few or no tools with features for KM. I don't know if that's true, but very few is probably right. And the third view is KM can support AI. And this is probably the most radical view, because the thesis here is, if you think about who's performing the work, who's doing the legal work, it's now lawyers. But more and more, AI is going to get smart enough to do some of the commoditized work. So how does KM frame its role to feed the right data to lawyers and AI going forward? If AI is drafting all the NDAs, maybe you just feed the right stuff to that AI. So this is a sort of interesting strategy point. Like, where do you want KM to play in a world where AI is getting smarter and smarter and smarter? And relevantly to this is the point of trust and reliability. Debbie Ting, when I was talking to her, said verification is one of the hardest things to do with Gen AI right now. And one of the problems of some of these tools is they don't even tell you what went into generating the answers for RAG. So you've got no way to know in advance whether it's even looking at the right stuff. And if it's not even looking at the right stuff, you will never get the right answer. So verification is going to get harder as things get more automated. So in that universe, what's KM's strategy at your firm? So I'll actually throw that open. It's not a rhetorical question.
Yeah,
I think
there's an interesting question here that ties into also the how and the why and the KM's role, because there's the data that you're extracting and how it's summarized, and then there's the what do I care about, right? And I think I would argue that right now, if I were to compare, for example, I would tell any tool that I'm using, hey, summarize the terms in this agreement that an employment lawyer would care about, or that would be the prompt. Then the headings that AI would choose, not just the data that it extracts, but what it considers to be important, would be better than most second-year lawyers, right? So it's the quality of the summary in terms of that. So there, I think the notion of utilizing, like at the highest level, you have KM lawyers who are subject matter experts that know what data is important to extract. But if you don't have that level of expertise making the decisions, then AI can increasingly play a role in figuring out what data is important, not just in extracting that data, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, this is a question we can talk about for a very, very long time. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a certain slide that I've prepared earlier. And with this, I'm going to bring it to a close. And this is another poll for those of you who are into polling. And it's this question: because AI is so important right now, lightning round, where's AI making a genuine impact? And I'm going to show you something really, really interesting right after you start voting. So please type in a couple of words. Where's it making a genuine impact? And I'm going to share that screen for everybody to see. So extraction, summarization, curation, etc., etc. Tracking people, summarization, extraction. Now, as you're writing this, you may remember the questions I asked earlier, which are, what are your lawyers asking for from KM? And what's your firm asking for from KM? And you may, if you put all three of these word clouds together, come to the conclusion that there's very little overlap with where AI is showing a genuine impact to what lawyers and the firms are asking for. And here is a slide where our interviewees answered. What do lawyers want versus where AI is promising? Almost nobody had any overlap except for Naveen. Naveen's was data and expertise and give me an answer with my content, which is the transformation point I mentioned earlier. If you have the data, AI is really, really good at transforming the data at the point of need to information, insights, or wisdom. But it all comes back to you have to capture the data in the first place. How are you incentivizing your lawyers to contribute? What tools are you giving them to make them go, yes, I do want to give you this document because otherwise I'm putting it on my USB, dear James. And all of that kind of ties back together to we've known all of these issues for a very, very long time. And I think we're starting to have the tools to solve them. We're not quite there yet, but we're starting to. So where's AI showing genuine promise? Extraction and summarization.
Thank you, Harold. Are you going to send the shared slides with everything afterwards with the participants?
Yes, absolutely. So
and
I'm going to put
also your motion sickness thing that moves on the screen. Are you sharing that mind map with people?
Absolutely. So for those people who are interested in a copy of the mind map and a copy of the slide, please email me. This is my email address up here. Like I said, I'm friendly to a fault. So if I start telling you about my kids in a response email, just know that's par for the course.
I think we're probably going to send to everyone who attended, so they don't have to.
Oh, easy. I'll pass it on to you guys.
Thank you very much, everyone. Next week we're gonna have a mid-page talking about what if the publishers are not in control of all the knowledge. You might have seen an announcement yesterday that Perplexity now has all of Edgar available for free. So information is becoming air. You could just breathe it and it becomes part of life. So see you all next week. Please take a picture of this and answer the survey about what you like or don't like. It helps us with the future. And we'll see you next Friday. Thank you, everyone.